If you have a process of overthinking in any aspect, especially when it comes to your professional goals, you're going to want to stick around for this episode. Hey there, it's Erica Castner. I'm super stoked you're here for another episode of the Voices of Impact podcast. And today, I'm going to share with you some things that will help you stop overthinking your biggest professional goals. But spoiler alert, it's going to stem from things that you've got to do in your personal world. That's right, my friend. You're going to need to think about some of your overthinking tendencies. That's a lot of thinking in the personal capacities. And I promise that if you do that work, it will help you start formulating some ideas around what you've got to do to push through on your professional goals. Doesn't mean that it's going to make your overthinking tendencies go away. Heck no. I promise you, I've done a lot of work around this, and I still from time to time will get affected by overthinking the process of accomplishing my biggest goals. But if you can be mindful of some of these things that I'm going to share with you today, it will at least help you get the steps that you need to recognize how your overthinking tendencies are stopping you dead in your tracks and what to do with it instead. So I'm going to be looking away from the camera from time to time because I do have a few notes to keep us on focus for this conversation. But a high level view of what we're going to be chatting about today is number one, what are the root causes of overthinking? And two, we're going to talk about your reasons why your overthinking tendencies are keeping you stuck. And I'm also going to share with you how to take action in spite of negative feelings and those emotions that come up in the process of pushing play on your biggest goals. And if you stick with me towards the end, I'm going to share with you about a new community that I am creating for small business owners with big vision that will help you stay in community with people that are going through all the things that you might be struggling with, and also helping you celebrate your successes in that process. I'm going to share with you at the end of this episode today how to get access inside of that free community. Okay, so let's discuss thing number one, which is what your root causes of overthinking might stem from. Bottom line is this: it's going to steer from your fear, your overwhelm, and your complacency, period. Those are the three things. Like everything that you might be overthinking right now come from a root of fear about the outcome. It also comes from your overwhelm about the decisions that you've got to make in your current world. The thing that you're overthinking right now, there's a good chance that you've got several things that you're overthinking, and your brain is so overwhelmed with what you've got to do next that it doesn't have space to get to that next level of awesomeness. It just doesn't have any room to grow. And complacency, meaning that you are not taking action. Instead of getting into the flow of knowing what you've got to do next, you're just sitting back waiting for things to happen. There was a conversation I was a part of recently, and it was in a group of women who have a lot of faith in their God and their higher purpose, and a higher voice, I should say. So whether they're faith-based, let me say that slower, whether they're faith-based or spiritually based, I love it because I am too. The challenge with letting a higher power dictate how you play out, though, it's limiting because you're not taking action that higher power is downloading to you to take in the first place. So if you're sitting back waiting for a higher power to guide you on that possibility, whether it's God or Buddha or another higher power that you pray to and that you invest your faith and your spirituality into, you still have to take action. So all of this stuff today, I want you to look at it from a high level view because there's so much I can share on this topic. I'm not going to be able to share it in a 25-minute podcast episode, but I do want you to look at these things from a high level view today and how this might play out in your own scenario and how you are using the information as a crutch to your overthinking tendencies. And again, this is no fault to you. This is how we're wired in a lot of ways. This is done over time. Overthinking tendencies started when you were little. And again, that's another can of worms that we cannot go down today, but it is another form of how this stems and how this is rooted into your existence and how it shows up today in your adult world. One of the things that we also think about as it relates to root causes is your perfectionism tendency. So if you have a tendency to think all the time that you've got to get it perfect in order for you to take action, the only way that we're going to get good at something, or the only way that we're going to see clarity in something, is if we do it, if we try it, if we attempt it. And there's going to be data in that doing that's going to give you what you need to drive your next decision. So if you are in that place of saying, I have to make it perfect for me to take action, well, the only way that you can even attempt to get it perfect, and that isn't even going, that's such a high pedestal to try to shoot for, is you've got to do it. You've got to be in it. You've got to attempt to craft whatever it is that you're striving perfection in. It's not going to be thinking it through and having the perfectly laid plan. You've got to be able to implement that plan. Another thing that has a tendency to root us in overthinking is, what are the next shiny objects that are out there? And social media does a great job of this. I have a tendency to work with a lot of clients in this realm of understanding what their social media platforms they should be on, what should they be doing to create content, and they want to do all the things. So they're overthinking all the scenarios, when really, in fact, all they need to be thinking about is, where are their ideal people hanging out, and go create content or go be present in that arena, go be present in that platform. Don't try to be on all the things because some social media guru says that there's a certain platform right now and a certain way to create content that's going to be the hot thing, because that hot thing might not be worth your investment as a professional to make sense of it. So being mindful of those shiny objects. Another thing that kind of keeps us stuck in this overwhelming thinking is understanding the return on your investment. So anytime that you're making a decision, you will have this battle going on in your brain to decide whether or not it's going to give you the result that you want. And so if you're not making a decision on something, you probably doubt your return on your investment. And again, I'm going to share with you that the only way that we're going to gain any return on our investment is if we're making the investment in the first place, if we are doing the thing that's going to generate the result. So you might not get the result that you're looking for if you attempt to do something that's going to position your brand. Let's say in this example, maybe you're setting out to start a new podcast or to start a new YouTube channel. You won't know your return on that investment until you actually do the damn thing. So making sure that you're putting yourself out there and trying things out is going to, again, give you that data that's going to drive your decisions. If it's not returning if it's not giving you a good return on your time and your energy and your focus, then you got to give that time to decide. You can't just assume that because you do one video or one podcast episode and you don't have 1 million downloads, that thing didn't work. Now, if you do that for a year and you don't get the result that you're looking for, that would be a time for you to say, okay, in this last year, because I was consistent in this level, I am now able to do X, Y, Z. You're able to look at that data and say, what do I need to do next? Is it worth me pursuing this? Do I need to make an adjustment? Am I doing one heck of a good job? And do I need to keep making this effort? All of that information is going to be present for you when you are consistently doing that thing for some time. And, there are certain things that I've done in my business that have taken me years to master, years to figure out. And I'm not saying that on this podcast episode today that whatever you're thinking about right now in terms of your own, whether it's visibility efforts or your business growth efforts, it doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily take you years to do either. But the only way that you're going to find out the length of time it's going to take you to do it is by doing. Okay. So one of the bonus assignments I want to give you in this episode, and this is going to be something you're going to have to do outside of the space of this episode today. And I want to do one more thing before I say that bonus assignment. My show notes for this episode are going to be over at ericacastner.com/143. That's ericacastner.com/143. And that will give you a high level view of not only what we're talking about today, but also the bonus activities that I'm going to give you throughout this episode and the link to the massive group that we're creating for those small business owners with big, gigantic vision. So I wanted to jump in here and say that really quick. Bonus assignment for you to get clarity on what you're overthinking is I want you to get a piece of paper and a notebook and a journal, something that you can actually physically handwrite something down. And I want you to write down all the things that you were doing, all the decisions, I should say, that you are making in a typical day. So all the decisions that you're currently making in a typical day, I want you to jot those down on paper and save that for, you'll do that first, and then I'm going to give you another step that you're going to need to do with that list in this episode. But bonus assignment, you're going to make a list of all the decisions that fill your work day. Okay, let's talk about some things that are keeping you stuck professionally. And I've got some stories around these examples for you today, because I find that when I'm just rattling off examples, that's one thing. But if I can relate it to a story, it's more palatable. It's easier to digest. And so this actually stems from a conversation I had with a group of friends of mine who helped me with a program that I facilitate through Dress for Success Southwest Florida. And these 4 women showed up in a powerful way recently for a panel discussion that we had for a group that I facilitate called Women Empowered Through Employment series. And it was really about, the whole discussion was around making decisions in the workplace. This episode is predominantly how to stop overthinking in the workplace. And I feel like these scenarios that I'm going to share with you today go hand in hand with some of their talking points. And so I won't be able to share all of their stories, and I want to protect the sacredness of those stories for that conversation. But there were some nuggets that I learned in that conversation as I heard their remarks, and I wanted to share some of these takeaways with you as it relates to your own overthinking tendencies. So some of the reasons why you're overthinking and why this is keeping you stuck professionally is, number one, you're choosing to get sucked up in other people's drama. What do I mean by this? In the simplest form, it could be gossip. Right? It could be that thing that maybe it's water cooler gossip if you're in a workplace environment. Maybe it's something snarky that you are commenting on or reading on social media. Perhaps maybe it's even a conversation you're having with your BFF or your spouse or your partner around something that is more gossipy than it is serving. And so we could look at the situations that are in our world, the information that we're getting, and if we're not filtering the information in a way that's going to serve us, meaning that if we're just allowing that gossip to come in our lives, if we're allowing the social media, recently, there was a whole big football game, I should say, that recently happened with a massive entertainer. And that massive entertainer, Rihanna, came out and she revealed on the biggest stage in a long time, biggest stage, I should say, that she was pregnant. And a lot of people had an opinion about her pregnancy and her performance and the players, how they performed, and all of this stuff that really at the end of the day has nothing to do with your goals. It's entertainment. It's fine for the moment, but it's not something that we should be festering on. Here we are 4 days after that big game, and I'm still seeing things on my feed from people complaining and moaning about the results or the things that happened at that game from 4 days ago. That has nothing to do with their goals, their aspirations, their payroll, their budgeting, their bill paying. Like, any of that doesn't have anything to do with what's really truly important in the world right now. I mean, it shouldn't anyway, but if we are constantly letting little things like that stop us in our tracks, it leaves us very little room to go out there and think about the things that are massively important to us. So making sure that you have clarity around your goals. My friend Elizabeth, on this panel discussion, she had mentioned it's better to be an observer than an absorber. So meaning that, it's okay to observe the things that are around you, because on some level, we've got to create thoughts around those observations. And it helps us drive our decisions as we're observing what's happening in our internal world and our external world. But we don't necessarily have to absorb all that information and take it all on ourselves, because if the moment we start absorbing that information onto our goal setting and our pathway, it limits our decision-making ability for the things that are truly important. So just being mindful of letting go of other people's drama, letting go of things that don't make sense for your personal aspirational goals. Number two, another thing that's affecting your overthinking tendencies is focusing on all the steps that you got to take towards that goal right now, today. Like there are massive goals that you probably have on your plate right now. I can't get into all those examples, but if you were thinking about a particular goal in mind and you know that there's going to be a series of steps that you got to take to get it, instead of trying to think about all those steps and accomplishing all those steps in one day or in a finite amount of time, allow yourself to just look at what's the next step in front of you and taking that. Yes, you can think about that next step. I want you to give some thought around that, but don't overthink it and lament it to the point that you don't know if it's the right time for you to take it. And understand that when you are taking those smaller steps, those steps that are right in front of you, those are usually the things that are going to lead you to bigger steps and bigger opportunities and more abundance in your pathway to get those things done. Like if you're not taking those steps now, how can you expect that you're going to be able to receive the bigger opportunities and the bigger be able to take the bigger steps that you've got to take to accomplish those goals? So a friend of mine who was on this panel discussion for Dress for Success Southwest Florida, Shahida, was talking about her pathway to opening medical clinics. Now she is locally to Southwest Florida where I live, but she has medical clinics all over the world that are impacting women all over the world. And she told the story about how when she had the idea in her heart to open up this clinic locally, she had about $70 to do it with, right? She didn't have like an abundance of money and resources at the time to do it. But she realized that her vision and her goal was so massive that even though she had $70, and most people would look at her and think, girl, you're crazy. Like there's no way you can do this big goal. She just said, what is the thing that I can do right in front of me? What's the thing that I can do today that's going to move me closer to the bigger picture? And so by looking at those smaller steps, day by day, step by step, it opened her up to other relationships, other funding, other resources that were going to get this clinic open for her and help her achieve her massive dream. But she wouldn't have been able to meet those connections or come into that abundance of money flow and idea flow without taking the first tiny step today. So I want you to think about your own vision. What does that look like for you? And what's the first step? What's the next step, I should say, that you've got to take today, not tomorrow, not next week, but what are you going to do today in order to make that happen? Number 3 on my list. So when you are overthinking stuff, it could be because you are taking on too many high energy, but low return tasks. And what I mean by this is, are there things that are on your to-do list that if money and energy and time were completely abundant, could you go pay, teach, or train somebody else how to do those things? And in a lot of cases, like it's so funny because I will get, especially when I'm working with small business owners in this capacity to grow their team and they're overwhelmed with all the things. And they're like, I really wish I could afford an assistant. And I say, okay, well, let's talk about affording the assistant. What do you need them to do? And so, of course, there's a lot of scenarios that come up in that conversation. But what ends up happening is we decide together in that conversation that there's a lot of low level tasks that they're doing, meaning that their brain power and their energy need to be focused on more like high ticket strategy. And when I say high ticket, what I mean is like things that are going to generate them thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for their business versus things that are going to cost them $10 or $100. And so in the simplest form that I can share with you today is look at again, this goes back to the list that I had you on the bonus assignment thing that I mentioned earlier in this episode today. If you look at all your decisions that you've got to make, I want you to put a star by the things that you could pay, teach, or train somebody else to do if money and time and energy were completely abundant. So go back to that list and put a star by the things that like you don't have to do. Like you could go pay, teach, or train somebody else how to do those things. Now, you might not know how to find those people, but could you, in theory, start thinking about, yes, these are things that, you know what, I don't need to be stressed out about this. I don't need to be making a decision about this because it's keeping me from the things that are going to generate more revenue, more opportunities for my business. So go back to that list and put a star by the things that you could, in theory, regardless of if time, money, and energy were completely abundant, you could pay, teach, or train somebody how to do that. Okay. Let's see here. Number 4. So holding back on your ideas because you're not a leader. This is one of the biggest crippling things that keep us in overthinking mode when it comes to our biggest professional goals. If we are not the perceived leader on a project, or maybe we feel like we don't have authority, perhaps maybe we are a leader in something, but we haven't been in that business long enough. We haven't done that idea. We haven't been in that industry long enough. And so we start second guessing our abilities, and then we don't speak up. We don't do things because we think we have to be at a certain level in order to execute on them. And this next story actually comes from another panelist, a newer friend of mine, Kelly, who was on the panel yesterday. And she was discussing about this fundraising initiative that she was a part of a while back. And she wasn't the leader on the team. In fact, a lot of the leaders within this organization at the time had this perception of talk, and they said all the right buzzwords, but there was no like real plan to implement any massive change for this fundraising initiative. And so Kelly thought about it, and she said, that's an interesting observation that we keep talking about it, but there's nothing in the works to change the situation. And so she had an idea, and didn't know if it was going to work, because it was merely an idea that she thought, well, if we tried it, it could generate stuff. And so instead of just presenting the idea, she actually backed it up with a plan and came to leadership and said, you know what, this is my plan. This is my timeline. I think this could work. And so fortunately, the organization gave her a little bit of runway to go do it. And with that said, not only was she able to achieve the goal of raising the funds for the organization, but she was able to double the goal in a short amount of time because she spoke up. So I want you to think about your own ability right now. What ideas are you holding back on, whether it's for your own organization, an organization that you work for, a committee that you're sitting on? What are those ideas that you think that are going to work? You're pretty confident that if you just put a little bit of implementation power behind it, it could actually pan out. What are those things that you're holding back on? And I want you to take the next step in the next 24 hours to speak up on it, to start putting that plan into motion. Talking to the people that are going to have to vote yes or no on that thing would be a start, even if it's yourself. If that's an idea that you're sitting on, but you're not following through on, what do you need to do to make that a hell yes? What do you need to do to step into that and say, I'm ready to take the next step to make that plan happen? And so you're going to know it better than I will, but that's just an idea for you to get clarity on those ideas that are holding you back. What can you do starting today to start putting that idea into motion? The fifth and final point I'm going to say on this topic today, as it relates to what's holding you back, before we get into some steps on how to put your ideas into motion despite your emotions or your feelings, is not taking the time to weigh out your scenarios. And so I'll wrap this part of the conversation up with Marie, who spoke on the panel for the Stress for Success program that I facilitate. And she had a powerful, very simple, but very powerful example on how we can weigh our decisions. So right now, if you have a heavy decision that you're making, are you taking the time to weigh out all scenarios? Because chances are you're not. You're letting those thoughts kind of manifest into something bigger inside your head, and letting those thoughts rule your actions. And so one of the things that Marie displayed for us during that discussion was a 3-part formula. It's very simple, and I'm going to give it to you right now. Number 1 is simply writing down the pros and cons of those decisions that you're making, but not just like the decision that you're making, like what's the scenario, the pros and cons scenario that would happen if you stayed in the exact same spot. And number 2, once you have that data and that information on paper, not letting that decision be driven by emotion. So you could be happy or sad about a situation in the very basic terms of emotions, but don't let those emotions guide your decision. Look at the facts. That pros and cons assessment on both scenarios, meaning where you're at today or where you're thinking about going, is going to give you the data that's going to drive your decisions. And it's going to be in black and white. You're not going to have this gray area of emotions. Well, you still will, but it's less likely that gray matter of emotions and feelings behind the situation are going to drive you. You're going to be able to look at tangible proof of why this is going to work or why it's not going to work and make your decision based on that information. And the final step in her simple formula is that it's better to be rested when making decisions. So there's no rule book that says that if you've got to make a decision, you've got to make that within a certain time frame. Maybe there is. I mean, there are obviously deadlines, but in a lot of cases, could you sleep on your decision? Could you take that initiative to go to bed, rest your mind, rest your body, rest yourself, and then say with clarity, now that you're awake in the morning, what you need to do next? And so having the first part of that, physically writing down in handwriting form, your pros and cons of where you are today, where you are thinking about going, what are the pros and cons for both scenarios, and then letting that data guide you versus letting emotions guide you, and then taking some time to be rested on the decision. Because once you're rested, you're more likely to make a decision from a core place that feels more congruent with your values versus getting caught up in the drama of taking actions fast and not having any like major thought around it. So, and I know that sounds like it's counterintuitive when I'm talking about overthinking, but the only way that we're going to get clarity on the things that are important to us is if we take those simple steps that I just laid out that Marie had outlined for our participants in this program in a way that will help you make that decision in a stronger, more compelling way. Okay. We're going to wrap this episode up with a few ideas to help you drive your decisions and stop overthinking in spite of your emotions. And here's where I want to go with this. So first and foremost, I want you to be present with your emotions, because here's the thing. If in this overthinking realm that you are not addressing your fears and your doubts and your uncertainty and maybe the judgment or whatever emotion you're tying to this decision-making skill or this decision-making in the first place, you limit yourself. You almost rob yourself of feeling all the feels through that process. So part of that, you don't want to limit on this for years and years and years, or even days in most cases. You want to be present with your true feelings around this. And part of that is writing down certain things. So, going back to that pros and cons example, that can be a way for you to write down some of your legit emotions around this. If you try to sweep this under the rug and you try to suck it up and say, you know what, I'm just going to push those feelings aside and those emotions aside because I need to be a certain way about this decision-making skills, that emotion and those feelings are going to come back to haunt you. So I want you to be present with your emotions. Don't lament, but do some writing exercises around this scenario to get those emotions out on paper and validate those things before you make the decision. The other thing that you can do to act in spite of your emotions and feelings is seek support. Chances are most people are going to pray to people that are falling prey, I should say, not praying to, but they're falling prey to people that have an opinion about something that they don't have any experience with. And so if you're seeking counsel from people that don't have any experience with the thing that you were deciding on, you're going to fall victim to whatever they think is possible. And that might be very limiting because they don't have any experience with it. But if you're seeking support from people that have already done the damn thing, it's going to empower you to say, you know what, there's living proof examples of people that have done this thing that I'm thinking about, that I'm nervous about, that I'm scared about, that I am feeling anxious about. And that's okay. So you seek the support from those people that are in the arena, kicking butt and taking names. There's a great Brene Brown talk. Her TED talk is super famous, but there is actually a 99U conference talk that I reference all the time for people that are overthinking or listening to people that are causing them to overthink decisions It's powerful. I'm going to link it inside of the show notes over at ericacastner.com/143. But it's a Brene Brown talk, and the paraphrasing the title, but it's around the why the critics don't count. And oftentimes we are listening to the critics in our life, and that's clouding our thinking capabilities. And so if we can surround ourselves with supportive people that are doing the things we want to do and that are in the arena doing what we aspire to go do, then we're more likely to follow through on the things that we say that we want to do instead of overthinking it and trying to plan it 7 ways to Sunday. Okay. Also, another thing to help you get out of overthinking, get into action in spite of your emotions is move your body, go out for a walk, do some sort of exercise, something that's going to get your arms and your body moving, your legs, your heart, your mind moving in a direction that makes you move forward. One of the most impressive things about some of you know that I am an Ironman triathlete. One of my favorite things to do while I'm training, and I don't get the beauty of listening to music because it's against the guidelines on the Ironman court. So I don't do any of that. I don't practice with any headphones or music or anything like that. It's just me and my thoughts. And one of the things that I relish in doing those longer trainings, when I'm on a bike for 4 or 5 hours, I allow I allow that movement to get things flowing. And so, yes, one could assume that maybe I'm overthinking certain things while I'm in those longer workouts, but I got to tell you that there's a lot of abundance that's happening in my mind because as I'm moving, I'm seeing nature. I'm wrapped up in like what's being present right now in that environment. And so it creates this level of abundance and freedom in my own thought process when I move. So you don't have to be an Ironman triathlete to do that. You can start moving by simply taking a walk around your block and getting your body moving so that the flow of your thoughts and your soul and your heart's moving and all of those awesome things, the blood's pumping, it gets your mind into a better state of flow. You can also declutter your environment. That's another true way to tidy up your pathways to taking action in spite of fears. If you are in a cluttered environment where there's all sorts of things floating around, it's not going to create any productivity in your thought process because you're too busy, believe it or not, thinking about those things that are cluttering your mind, cluttering your space. So it can start with mind clutter. It can actually, it's easier to start with physical clutter in your house, in your working environment, in your office, starting with that physical clutter. And you don't have to like declutter an entire room to get this party started. You can start with decluttering your desk and making sure that that is in a work environment that's going to support your goals moving forward. Okay, I know I covered a lot in a short amount of time, but what I want to give to you today is if you're jamming on what we chatted about today, there's a couple things that I can share with you. Number one, subscribe to the Voices of Impact podcast. This is the place to be if you want to elevate your business and your life and put yourself in that pursuit of your biggest goals to make a bigger impact with the audiences you're meant to serve. And if you need some additional support with this, we just created a free community. It's called the Small Business Big Vision Collective. So it's a free Facebook community where we are inviting female entrepreneurs, leaders, service providers, business owners, creators to come and play with us, come and explore what it's like to be in a community of other visionary thinkers who are thinking bigger than just where they're at today. They're thinking about the impact that they want to create, the changes that they want to see in the world. And so I invite you to come check that out. I'm going to have a link to where you can get access to that community over on my show notes page for this episode, which is ericacastner.com/143. That's ericacastner.com/143. So you'll be able to get free access to that Facebook community that we just started. And we've got about 25 women in that community so far. We just started it 2 days ago as I'm recording this episode. And so I'm excited to see how that's going to flourish. And you can be anywhere in the world. So you don't have to be I live in Southwest Florida. You don't have to live in Southwest Florida. You can be in a different country. It doesn't matter. If you are a small business or you have that, you're a small business creator, an entrepreneur, a leader who has a bigger vision for executing on things that are going to make change and impact with a bigger audience, then I encourage you to join us inside of that community. Just head on over to ericacastner.com/143, and there'll be a link to where you can join the Small Business Big Vision Collective. So with that said, we're going to wrap it up for today, but I do want to leave you with this. Your overthinking tendencies are let it guide you. Let it guide you, believe it or not, let it guide you to know that you are onto something great. The way that we combat it, though, is by taking action in small ways. Taking the next step, surrounding ourselves with for people that are going to support us and uplift us in this process, allowing yourself to process your flow of emotions, but not letting those emotions stifle you and get you stuck, and being a good steward of your own environment. Those are the things that are going to help you get out of that overthinking tendency all the time, falling into that trap. Doesn't mean that's going to make it go away, but it's going to at least help you feel empowered to know what you got to do next when you can do those 4 simple things to surround yourself with the right people, be present with your emotions, move in an environment that's going to help you grow, and then also be a good steward of your environment. If there's clutter in the way, get it out of your way so you can go be your best self. You've got this. You wouldn't be listening to this far if you didn't somehow know instinctively that you've got what it takes to make a massive impact with this world. So with that said, we're going to wrap it up for today. You rock, my friend. We'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.